You want the thing up? In just a minute. Yeah. So on this spooky Shabbat, I want to share a story and a few texts to kind of think about what this is like in Judaism. We, of course, do not celebrate Halloween, but it doesn't mean that there aren't some mystical, spooky things in our texts, and we can look at them together. So I want to start with a story about the city of Prague many, many hundreds of years ago. Some of you might know it. It was a very difficult time for the Jewish people. At that time, there was all sorts of anti-Semitism and attacks on the community. So Rabbi Lowe, who was the chief rabbi of Prague at the time, he was also known as the Maharal, decided to do something, but he wasn't sure exactly what he could do. He did everything that he could think of to protect his people. And finally, the people couldn't fight back against the soldiers. He didn't know where to turn. So he needed to do something powerful, almost magical, something that Kabbalists had talked about before, but who wasn't sure what to do. And so then he went down to the bank of a river and he formed this giant mound of clay. And then he sculpted it into the image of a person. And then he began to whisper all of these secret prayers into its ears, things that would help this being become living. He carved 3 letters into the forehead of this creature: Aleph, Mem, Tav. Aleph because it's the first word of the Hebrew, first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Tav because it's the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And Mem because it's right around the middle. And those words, the Aleph, Mem, Tav, spell emet, which means truth, because truth spans throughout the world. And so, as he carved the final letter into this creature's forehead, it opened its eyes, and the rabbi said, "Rise, it's time to protect the Jewish people." It couldn't speak, it just went out. And when the soldiers arrived to attack the Jewish people the next day, this creature protected them. And it happened so often that finally the emperor got wind of it and said, "What is it? What is it that's protecting the Jewish people?" And Rabbi Lowe said, "Well, I don't know anything about that. But if there were something that was protecting the Jewish people, it would probably go away if the attacks stopped." And so the next day came, there were all of a sudden no attacks on the Jewish people. And the day after that, Rabbi Lowe was a little bit wary. He said, maybe they're just trying to take a break and see what happens. But soon a couple of weeks passed, and it was clear that this creature that's called the golem, because it was made of mud from the riverbank, had protected and saved the Jewish people. And so then Rabbi faced the golem and said, "Your work here is done. You saved the Jewish people. It's not your time to be here anymore." And the golem didn't want what was coming, but slowly the rabbi reached up to his forehead and erased the aleph, because the aleph is the first letter, but the last 2 letters, mem, tav, spell the word mate, which means death. And so slowly the creature returned to this pile of mud on the riverbank. And the myth goes that Rabbi Lowe collected this mud and brought it with him and stored it into the attic of the synagogue just in case anybody came to harm the Jewish people again. So anybody who says we don't have mystical, spooky ghost stories, they are incorrect. And so I want to share some with you that you might recognize, you might not, from our texts. And yes, these are the texts that the copy machine ghost did not let me make the handout of, but we're going to project them. And I just brought a couple that I want to talk through with you, just to showcase, and these are many. There are many, many things. I brought 3. So the first should be relatively common from the book of Exodus. This is a text, if you remember, where Aaron and Moses go to Pharaoh and they say, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh says no. And Moses says, "I'm going to do all of these signs and wonders." And Pharaoh says, "My people can do signs and wonders too. My magicians, they know how to do those signs and wonders." No? Yes. Can we project it? That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to read it. Don't worry about it. Okay. So in Exodus in chapter 7, it says that Moses and Aaron came before Pharaoh and did just as Adonai commanded. Aaron cast down his rod in the presence of Pharaoh and the courtiers, turned it into, does anybody know the answer to this? A serpent, correct. And Pharaoh, for his part, summoned the sages and the sorcerers and the Egyptian magician priests. And in turn, they did the same with their spells. They cast down his rod, and it turned into serpents, but Aaron's rod swallowed theirs. So Aaron's serpent swallowed the serpents of the magicians of the court. So we have magicians and sorcerers in the Torah. If we go to Leviticus in chapter 19, we see ghosts. Did anybody know that we saw ghosts in the Torah? We do see ghosts. And you're actually going to see a little note that I wrote to myself that I forgot to take off when I put the handout together. But it says in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 31, do not turn to ghosts and do not inquire of familiar spirits to be defiled by them. I am Adonai your God. And what's interesting is the word here for ghosts is a similar word to the word ancestors. And the word familiar spirits indicates that these are people we might turn to if we were going to find a diviner to help us connect to the dead. We're not supposed to do that. It says so right in Leviticus. And then we get to the prophets. We get to the book of Samuel, where we have a few, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but has anybody heard here of the witch of Endor? You've heard of the witch of Endor. So the witch of Endor goes something like this. Samuel passed away. Samuel was this great prophet, and all of Israel mourned for him. But Saul, maybe perhaps more than all, because this king had relied on Samuel to communicate with God. So it says that all of a sudden, they're surrounded by Philistines, and Saul had forbidden ghosts and familiar spirits. So Saul, the king, had outlawed all of this. After all, it's written in the Torah. We aren't supposed to find diviners and sorcerers and magicians and witches. And yet the Philistine mustered and they marched on their camp, and Saul gathered all of Israel and they encamped near Gilboa. But when Saul saw the Philistine force, his heart trembled with fear. And Saul inquired of Adonai, and God did not answer him in all of the different ways that he looked for answers, whether by dreams or by prophets or by trying to connect with God himself. And Saul said to his courtiers, find me a woman who consults ghosts so that I can go and inquire through her. And his courtiers told him that there was a woman in Endor who consulted ghosts. So Saul the king disguised himself and put on different clothes and set out with 2 men. They came upon the woman by night and said, please divine for me a ghost. Bring up one for me and that I shall name to you. But the woman answered him, you know what Saul has done, how he's banned the use of ghosts and familiar spirits of the land. So why are you laying a trap for me to get me killed? And Saul swore to her by Adonai's name, as God lives, you will not get into trouble over this. And the woman said, who shall I bring up for you? And he answered, bring up Samuel for me. Bring up the prophet. The woman recognized Samuel, and she shrieked loudly, and she said to Saul, have you deceived me? You are Saul. And the king answered her, don't be afraid. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see a divine being coming down from the earth. What does he look like? It's an old man coming up wrapped in a robe, and Saul knew it to be Samuel. So he bowed low in homage, his face to the ground. And then Samuel asked of him, why do you disturb me and have me brought up? Saul said, I'm in great trouble. God is no longer speaking to me, no longer connecting with me. And he goes on to find out that he's disobeyed God, and that is why God is putting David as king in his place. But we see that there are these things in our Torah and in our tradition, in our Bible. We see witches, we see ghosts, we see magicians. We're not supposed to interact with them, but they are there. And sometimes in the ways that we interact with our world around us, it's important to know that we don't operate in a vacuum either, that Judaism is and has always been part of the wider culture. So even while we make different choices and create boundaries for ourselves and decide not to do certain things, we're always aware of the ways that those boundaries can sometimes be permeated even ever so slightly. So on this Shabbat, I want us to think about ways that we interact with with our culture that bring us not forms of where we have to go divine ghosts, but what are the ways that we have found blessings in the world around us that have helped maybe enhance our Judaism because of where we live, because of the environments where we find ourselves, because of traditions that we have learned and ways to bring holiness into our lives. There are so many ways to do it, and we have lots of traditions, lots of ways. I want us to think not only about Shabbat, but thinking ahead, or Halloween, thinking ahead to Thanksgiving. That is a season of gratitude that we're about to enter, which is a tremendously Jewish value. Opportunities to bring gratitude into our lives, whether they are on Shabbat, on every day, or on specific days of the year that aren't Jewish holidays, but are holidays of family where we have the opportunity to be thankful. These are ways that we can find Jewish values wherever we are in the world. Shabbat Shalom.